It's the third day of January 2016, and this is the Radical Agnostic, where ideology goes to die. Broadcasting from Tucson, Arizona, the Sonoran Desert, a beautiful winter day, 70 degrees. My name is John, I'm your host. We have the stowaway guest, Bryan Richter.
Howdy.
And we have our other guest, Eddie West.
I'm sorry.
I'd like to point out that the first show of 2016 is vegetarian.
There's no beef.
There is no beef.
This is a veggie burger.
Wow.
Yeah. Mark is still sick, everybody. He'll be back next week. So he's not here. It's just the three of us.
There'll be a lot less shouting.
That's
not true.
It's the new year. There was a lot of shouting in the last 20 minutes, I'll tell you that.
There was. We got animated.
Yeah.
The show before the show.
Yeah.
John's got something in his teeth, and he has a sexy Ryan Gosling haircut going on.
The old comb over. I brought it back after 23 years of setting it aside. This is the haircut I
It's a
grew
good
up
haircut.
With. Thank you.
It's working for you.
Thanks,
like I said,
guys.
I do feel strangely attracted to you.
Well, like I said,
Because
there's
Ryan
nothing
Gosling,
strange about that.
You and Ryan Gosling
say.
kind of have the same head. It's long.
Do we?
Yeah.
Gosling.
Especially in profile. He's Gosling.
He's like a sex idol for women or whatever, or like a man idol, and his last name is Gosling. Like it's all too perfect.
He looks like a sad puppy.
Yeah.
when he wants to.
Gosling.
But then he grabs a fucking hammer.
He looks like a sad puppy when he's doing like he's got the half-lidded eyes, like, oh, I'm a sad puppy, beating you to death with a hammer.
Grabs a hammer and drives the white trash Camaro, and it's a whole new deal.
So here we are, folks. 2016. We've almost been doing this for a year. So looking back on things, I came to a few conclusions. Like, for example, last week, episode 42, probably my favorite episode to make. In other words, during it, I was loving it. And then afterwards, I was extremely disappointed when you get to about halfway through and I start rambling about the Chomsky lecture. It was just too dense. And it was, one of the things I've learned is that I got to talk more to the audience rather than you guys, which has to be, I can't go too far with that because
there's a certain irony in you saying I have to talk to the audience rather than you guys.
Oh, you, Eddie and Bryan. Exactly. They're so ironic, actually.
I knew what you meant.
Yeah.
Well, because you're sitting here, but the audience isn't.
That's the whole point, exactly. So, and I felt like I was executing an argument that you, Eddie, and myself and Greg have had, and trying to find a new approach to that. And then, but people out there who are just tuning in, they're like, I'm not familiar with this argument about brains and minds and everything. So I got to sort of look at that and focus on that. So I came up with a few guidelines for the new season of shows. One was I should talk less. 2, Bryan should talk more. Because when I was listening,
I love when Bryan talks.
Yeah.
Actually, Bryan's probably my favorite person to hear talk on the show, both because he's got a good radio voice. I mean, I've got a face for radio, but Bryan's got a voice for radio. I
got the face too.
Yeah, but his stories have a dramatic flair, too.
Well, his stories have a dramatic flair, and to a certain extent, Bryan, you are almost an audience surrogate, because when you ask a question, it's one that we should have answered when we started talking. And if we didn't, and you ask it, it's great.
Well, honestly, I do honestly try to remember that people are listening. And I'm like, I know that it's not always easy subjects, so I try to ask a question in the middle that breaks it down into real simple terms.
Right, which is a very valuable contribution, especially when we're getting into heady, sort of dense subject matter, which I think is not a bad thing, and we should continue to do that. That's kind of the theme of this show is like.
It's the same thing I do everywhere, though. When I'm in biology class, I ask a question that equates to something else.
Yeah.
So that it just makes it easier for me to wrap my head around.
Yeah.
Like something I already understand.
Right.
But I do think that talking about someone else's lecture has some rough edges to it. Now, if you're going to talk shit and you got some quotes, like, you can pull a quote out and be like, yeah, and then listen to this asshole say this thing. That's one thing. But when you talk about somebody else's lecture, unless you know the audience has been listening to it, it's a little rough. I almost would rather maybe we all watched a lecture and then we just talked our own opinions on it.
Yeah. I just felt like I could condense this Chomsky rant down to something easily explicable. And I don't think
something intelligible.
Yeah, intelligible.
Like I didn't listen to the show again, but I had fun doing it. I always have fun doing it.
Yeah, maybe people liked it. I don't know. I was just that day when I re-listened, I was just like, no, because the first half was good. We had the rape case. That's something I think I explained fairly well and succinctly. Yeah. And then we had the Star Wars conversation and everything. But anyway, let's not go back over the last episode. But so those are some of the things I've learned. Also, another one was that I should prepare more, which
he did not do.
Ironic is another irony that it's on my outline right here, but under that is a lot of blank white space. We got some exciting stuff for you guys today. I don't know where to start. It's kind of a lot of little topics, but I'm sure we'll hit one harder than the rest. We'll get fired up. Wait, what's going on with this federal building in Oregon right now? So this is the Bundy Ranch.
There's 3 Bundys there from what I hear.
Yeah, the Bundy Ranch about a year ago was the site of a standoff between federal authorities and these ranchers.
Over BLM grazing rights, if I'm correct, is what it shakes down to, and then the tyranny.
These guys are kind of like Oath Keeper type guys. They're militia.
I think those aren't they're either the Patriots or the Oath Keepers, because one of the dudes from Arizona, that John Ritzenheimer or Ritzauer guy, is involved. He's with the Patriots or something they're calling themselves.
Yeah, and he was...
The Minutemen was down on the border, wasn't it? Like yes. Fred Barnett and those guys. Like, that was the Minutemen.
So these guys are armed, conservative, sort of libertarian guys, right? Basically, we can say that the Bundys, Cliven Bundy...
Now, to be very clear, hold on. Just to be very clear, because when I hear Bundy, I think Ted Bundy. This is not them.
No relation.
No, this is not.
No, well, I actually don't know if they're related.
But these are ranchers and good old gun-toting boys.
Yeah, these are good old boys would probably be a good description. So just to be very clear.
I think if they were related to Ted Bundy, we would have heard about it.
This is a really...
Well, I was just thinking the first 5 minutes of this conversation, I'm already like, wait.
Yeah.
Ted Bundy's family's upset?
So Cliven, the old man, he's not involved in this.
I don't think he's there.
But... some of his family, the sons, have now taken over an environmental building, isn't it?
A wildlife refuge.
Wildlife refuge.
It's the headquarters of it. Yeah.
And because there's 2 other guys, a father and son, who were arrested for arson.
From what I gather, for controlled burns is what I can get out of it.
That's their side, is that they were just doing a controlled burn to protect their property.
From invasive species.
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to tell you, like, I boned up on this real quick before I came in.
Right.
So I didn't get as much as I normally would.
Yeah.
But all that is what I understand about it. And now they served some part of a prison sentence, but now they're being told they have to go back to prison.
Yeah, they served a couple months each. It was what it was, and then they got out, and some judge was like, "No, you should go for longer than that," which I didn't understand.
But then it got overturned. They took it all the way to the Supreme Court, and they refused to overturn the decision. And these guys, from what I can gather, I would have to read more, but they're not supporting the Bundys and what they're doing.
Right, the 2 guys that
didn't ask for it, don't necessarily
the building
want it.
is being occupied as a political statement to sort of free these 2 other guys, the burning guys, the arson guys, and they have divested themselves from they're like, no, they're not speaking for us.
Let me ask this one question. Is that wilderness area that's been set aside, because it's like a conservation area, it's supposed to be kept wild?
It's a refuge, yeah.
Is that where they did the burn at? Is that why they've taken that place?
No.
So it's not, the place they've taken isn't even directly related to what these guys are in trouble for.
And the guys who are going back to jail, it was because there was an error in their sentencing. It was under federal law, your sentence was too short. So like,
it didn't satisfy a minimum.
Right. So
I think a valid case could be made for like, go fuck yourself.
Too fucking bad.
But I do think it's a valid question to be asked and needs to be adjudicated.
And arming yourselves.
They did appeal it. And then the appeal got denied all the way up by the Supreme Court denied it.
But is arming yourselves and occupying a federal building the proper response?
I'm going to say no.
Well, and I have a little rant here about
I'm gonna
civil
say no.
disobedience.
Okay.
The original print, because people forget this. People think that this is an example of civil disobedience. They shouldn't have consequences. That is actually not the origin of the concept. The origin of the concept was, I will do this thing, and then I will go to jail under the terms of this, I will peacefully, I will go, I will then give myself up.
Right.
And I will, and
To make
I
a
hope
political
that the
statement.
people say, well, that's nonsense. And then things change.
Right.
It's not supposed to be, well,
I'll go to the white deli counter as a black man, and I'll sit down, and they'll arrest me, and then I'll shove it in your face, all of your faces. That look, I got bound in chains and taken to a cage because I sat at this thing.
And
In other words,
hopefully
it
you'll be
shows
taken away, taken out of the jail. Like hopefully they'll go, oh shit, that was terrible, and we should let him out.
Yeah.
But like this idea that like, well, I shouldn't even have to go to jail. It's like, no, like that is part of the process of the civil disobedience. Like it's not unjust for you to go to jail when you've clearly broken the law.
That's a good point.
We should have that discussion.
Well, and this also is not, I think, simple civil disobedience because of what they're saying also. And what I've read is that we'll fight to the death, and like we're not,
they're armed. So that's not civil disobedience.
Well armed from the looks of it.
Yeah.
Well armed.
It's not, but it's a topic that comes up a lot.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
it's in the same vein. So, and I apologize if I equated them with civil because I don't even think they would call this civil disobedience.
Well, no, I mean, it is to the degree, like if you showed up there and walked in and occupied the building like other people do with peaceful protest and just sat down and changed yourself to something or did something like that, that's civil disobedience.
Right.
We have to draw a line between armed uprising and civil disobedience.
Yeah.
And this is, I think you guys are really fucking pushing. I mean,
So
you went too far right away.
Bryan, can you
right away, you just jumped to fucking let's arm up and go occupy.
And that's their shtick, though. I mean, these are the kids of Clive and Bundy.
They wanted to take it this far for a long time.
And like they threw pennies at the state house because they're buying back their government. Like that's nonsense. And I think that that's a problem of philosophy, frankly. I think there's not enough focus on philosophy. Like,
well, we went through this. It was called the Civil War.
Are the Republicans
we determined that the
unfairly
federal
getting
government,
these guys, though? Are they libertarians? Are they like the extreme libertarians?
I'm assuming they have libertarian principles. They probably vote for Republicans because almost no one votes for third parties. I don't know. I'm just speculating. But yeah, I mean,
that's really besides the point.
Yeah,
I'm not.
They're probably a mix of conservative and libertarian is what it sounds like to me. So, just like all this militia.
And like, does anybody get the real? I'm sorry. Go ahead. Finish.
Well, my question for you is: can you explain what beef is going on about online? Try to fairly give his approach to this because he's outraged and getting in arguments.
Well, no, I know what it became, but what beef? What he was in his initial statement, it became something different, which was a much more in-depth debate. But his initial statement was, "Look at all the liberals that are against using drone strikes in a fucking war against what we're considering our enemy."
Right.
But they want drone strikes against these guys in Oregon now, which are American citizens. Be they or not be they acting a fucking fool.
So
they're automatically calling for violence and death against these guys.
Presumably he's reacting to someone online who said they should just kill these guys that are occupying the federal building.
Right.
Because I don't know who's calling for that.
Yeah, but that ignores the perfect.
Well, I think what he's talking about is in those debates, and his friend Abel gets in there and makes some good points about when you try to argue with the real illogical anti-gun person who's telling you, like, if you want guns, you should be locked up. We should fucking kill you. And you know how many times I've gotten that. When I'm like, well, let's have a reasonable discussion. They're like, no, if your dick's so small and you're so scared that you think you need to carry a gun, then you need to be locked up or put away or just put out of your misery. Right. And that you get that a lot.
I know.
And that's what he's talking about. And he's not wrong. I'm sure it's happening. Yeah, those people. Yeah. They're out there. They're all over Facebook pounding away at their keyboard war.
Yeah. Now, my approach to this is that if you polled Americans, how many liberals would you get expressing things like that? It's I would say 2%, something like that.
Well, maybe if you polled them, but if you sit in a Facebook room and disagree with them, you're going to get more than 2%. Because that's just historically what I've experienced.
And I think but and this was the theme of a couple shows back, was my whole point about ideologies and these, like, especially when you look at feminism and men's rights advocates, they're the two sides of the spectrum, like extreme feminists and men's rights guys. They only exist because the other extreme exists, and they consort with those people online all the time.
I disagree to a certain
and
extent.
they get because of the way news is now delivered to us, like according to our desires, air quotes, according to our tastes. I get tons of Bernie Sanders articles. Right. Those people are now their news news feeds and their social media feeds are filled with, say, I'm a men's rights advocate, filled with crazy feminist stuff that was said on some blog the other day.
Right. Or maybe not said and just put on a name.
Right. And Fox News, they'll put up the craziest liberal they can find. They got Al Sharpton's on there all the time, whereas like liberals are like, please don't talk to Al Sharpton. We don't like him, but he's like a regular contributor to Fox News, showing the liberal perspective, and MSNBC, same thing. So
hey, at least we got mostly rid of Jesse Jackson.
Yeah, he seems to have mostly disappeared. There's only part of him. His mustache is the only part left. Or is that Sharpton? Anyway,
well, they both have excellent mustaches. I mean, in their defense.
But I think Jesse's is more glorious. It's a more glorious mustache.
Okay.
Well, only since Al Sharpton lost the weight. Al Sharpton looks weird since he lost the weight. The mustache doesn't look healthy. Nothing about him looks healthy.
Well, he doesn't have the power behind it anymore. It doesn't have the harumph. Yeah.
So anyway, my point is just that Mark may be getting pulled into what I think, Bryan, you've been pulled into a lot is discussions with these people and they're exactly what you say they are. They're keyboard warriors.
Oh, and I've so avoided them. I'm so good at it now. I just don't.
Well, it's just like if someone came up to you in the street, and this has happened probably to all of us at some point in life, and deliberately tried to egg you on into something. Like you didn't just get into an argument with someone and it escalated. Some guy came up and was like, hey, you're a faggot or something, or poked you. It's someone who's deliberately trying to cause a confrontation.
If you really think about it, a lot of my anger management stories start that way, bro. I just react poorly to that guy.
Yeah.
And then they become I
don't
segment on the show.
I don't know. I think they usually start with some kind of like cutting off in traffic or something, and then it escalates. I'm saying when you know 100% that this guy has a purpose to egg you on and make you react, you're going to be less likely to react, even you, Bryan, than just a normal fight that happened organically. And so my point is, we should treat these people online the way we treat such a person in real life, which is you just have to smile and turn around and walk away.
I don't even comment anymore. I just don't get in. I'm not going to be in a discussion with anybody about any difficult topic unless I know who it is and I know they're capable of being reasonable.
Or you don't know them, but they're being very respectful from the start. And they're like, let's talk about point number 1. Here's point number 2, and that's the best way to do it. But
I run into very few of those, and usually they're getting run out too. They're like, hey, dude, you'll get a comment like, hey, bro, see you later.
Yeah.
Guy, I can't deal with all this crazy, man. I'm out.
Well, so all right. So Mark's angry at hypocritical liberals. Oh, that's new. Who are online saying that these guys occupying the federal building should be shot.
But it's not necessarily hypocritical. Because, and that's the problem, is I do think some people, I'm not going to talk shit about Mark, but some people sometimes forget, and that's a problem. And that's, I have a problem because people don't always read everything I write because I make these walls text. And I understand that because the internet tends to want snippets. The problem of snippets is you can't fully explain your position. I actually don't necessarily have a strong opinion on this, but it's an example. I could be very against our use of drones overseas and be fully in favor of drones in this circumstance, because it's the problem of the perfect weapon. The problem of drone strikes is usually not, well, we're killing terrorists, and it's 100% just the terrorists, and we've got them and they're dead. Yeah. The problem is that the drones are impersonal, and then we kill civilians.
All right, so you're saying
let me frame it a little different then, because maybe I made a bad argument. Let me frame it a little different. These are the same liberals that are pissed off when the police shoot an armed person as soon as they see him without trying to negotiate or use any non-lethal means. They're the same people that are fucking wanting to hang people by the balls for that, are now calling for the police to do exactly that in this situation without trying to deal with
that's not necessarily
just to crush them with force.
Right. But let's not get into the semantics.
No, but that's the problem of philosophy. That's the problem of not explaining your
philosophy. But if you ask 10 people, do you think 10 people would agree with you on that it's not hypocritical?
Yeah. I try to make up statistics.
I know
what Bryan's saying, because most people...
Do you think 10 people would agree with you about that?
It does sound hypocritical. But the problem is it gets messy, because a lot of those liberals are framing it as a double standard. So they're already talking about black people getting shot right away. And they're saying, look, that's not happening here. And it may sound like they're saying it should happen here. And they might be saying, theoretically, it should happen here because it already does happen with blacks.
Well, and that's right up there with when people accuse Ayn Rand of being a hypocrite for taking Social Security. And the defense is usually, well, she didn't want to, but she had to participate in the system.
Right.
And so it's not necessarily hypocritical to say, well, I complain about the system where these black people are getting shot in the face all the time. I complain about that all the time. But that hasn't changed, and yet these white people in a much worse...
Yeah.
I mean, a guy walking down the street with a gun is not as bad as people taking over a federal building with guns. I mean, those are two different scenarios.
Yeah. So they're just saying... They're just saying...
And then Beef makes the point, it's also not near as dangerous to shoot at that one guy as it is to shoot at fucking a bunch of armed people. They're saying they have as many as 150 people. That's an army.
And what obviously should happen here is a long, drawn-out negotiation that comes to a peaceful conclusion. That's obviously what should happen.
That's what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And I don't want to get the idea that I'm supporting these guys.
No.
Like, you just asked me what Beef was saying, and I'm saying that's what he's saying.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And I'm not even going to say that those liberals who are claiming that, like, seriously ask yourself, what if 150 assault rifle armed black dudes took over a federal building? How do you think that's going to go down? Or guys in head scarves?
Well, yeah, exactly. We know for sure that the right in this country would be calling for killing them for use of force.
Oh, beyond a shadow of a doubt.
Right.
So,
but these are these white guys in the building are freedom fighters, right?
God,
And why is
again,
so why does Mark?
I want to add.
Why is that the instance of hypocrisy that he wants to address? I think his answer is that he's surrounded by liberals in his life because he is kind of one.
Well, what he's saying
more
is,
exposed
like,
to liberal hypocrisy.
No, he's just saying, like, welcome to the world where everybody's the same, which is, it's a consistent theme, I think, from Mark. He's like, you liberals are saying that these people are hateful and they preach murder and fucking all this stuff, and you guys really are the same. And so I don't think it's anything out of character for Mark to point that out. And I mean, he's not. I'm going to say this. I didn't disagree with anybody's point on that whole.
Yeah.
On that whole.
No,
post.
you looked like you were being very reasonable.
And anything anybody posted was reasonable. Everybody had a lot of good points. That dude's reference to the Freikorps in Weimar Republic was I think was really fitting. I was impressed by that. I'm like, wow, it's a nice reference and it really fits. Because
What's
these
that?
guys
What does
are.
that refer to?
Well, the Freikorps when. After World War I, when they dismantled the German army, the Germans had a huge army. So there were all these dudes who didn't know anything but being soldiers. So they got into these Freikorps, and like the Stahlhelms were one, the steel helmets. And
is Fry free?
Freikorps, yeah, the Free Corps. And these guys fought like, I don't know, kind of like...
I think it's FRIE.
Yeah, Freikorps.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but... As opposed to say,
it'd be
French
EI.
fries.
It would be EI actually.
Yeah.
Because in German, if you have an
It's
E and an
EI.
I, the second letter is the one you pronounce.
Yeah.
So Fry would be EI.
Yeah.
Probably.
Fry.
There's some exceptions.
It is. It's the second letter that you pronounce. I actually used to speak German okay while I lived over there.
I knew a smattering.
And they fought kind of like hired armies. They still
Kind of
practice their martial skills, and these are the guys who later became the SS and which I think is the Schutzstaffel. But they're just disenchanted ex-soldiers that, or militia types that.
It's interesting, man. I think when a lot of people get conservatives right now are showing a lot of concern for terrorism, and that's very reasonable. I think the fear is a bad motivator, and it's used
morally bad.
It's a
very good motivator,
right.
in the sense of motivating people.
Yeah. No, it's that I think the media is operationalizing fear as a kind of weapon to profit, and so they're the conservatives, and I think liberals are going to look at this as a very scary for them. This is scary now. White guys with assault rifles taking over buildings. It's like the Michigan militia type of thing, and they'll probably be really scared of that. I think the rational approach to this is just to encourage and hope that the law enforcement just negotiates an end to this, and I think that will be the case. A lot of these Oath Keeper guys, I don't think when push comes to shove, they really are ready to pull that trigger.
You know what? If they end up tightening a noose and cutting off the food supply.
Yeah. It's just old fashioned, man. Just siege tactics. Just surround the building.
There's no beans and franks to go on the fire. Resolve's going to break down pretty quick amongst most of these guys who've lived pretty nice lives. Because I don't really know who's involved. I say when I was describing the Freikorps, I was describing what they were. I wasn't describing what these guys were. Like I'm not sure what these guys are.
Yeah.
And I guess I've read varying things that they said they had 150 guys. People who were up there said they had about 15.
Well,
That's
they
a pretty
won't
big
say how
difference.
many people they have. That's the thing. They don't want to compromise to quote operational security.
Yeah, these guys are playing army.
Yeah, see, this
They're
is
playing army all day long. They love it. They love putting
so
on their
when's the
gear.
last time we really saw something like this? Was it Alcatraz in 73 or Wounded Knee in 70? Was it 71 when they both of those were Native American groups though
Yeah.
that occupied places.
Were they armed?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think Leonard Peltier was part of the one at Wounded Knee. But is that the last time? Something like that? Like an armed occupation of something in America by a group of
occupation.
Yeah.
Before
as
my-
opposed
Because that's
to-
what this is.
As opposed to say
Yeah.
a defense. Like say what you will about the many problems of the people at Waco. At least they did not occupy someone else's place or
Right.
even the federal government's
Right.
place.
Those
They
are the-
occupied-
those
they
are
were
the
being-
only-
Built their own plywood house.
Yeah.
Those are the only two other things that I would say that I remember.
Yeah.
And I honestly can't argue with that cause. This one I'm not sure, like, because what they're saying in the article is that they're up there fighting for their right to graze and mine and ranch to their, like, however they want
Well,
to
the
do
official reason is for the release of those
No,
guys.
that's not the official reason.
Oh.
They have not specifically mentioned them, except in terms of it's an example of an abuse of power.
And this is what they're saying, though. We should be able to ranch the land like we want, mine the land like we want, do whatever we want with the land without the government interference. That's what they're.
Yeah.
Am I wrong? That's
No.
what I'm getting.
And,
from
and the
these
problem
guys.
is that they've been asked like what are your demands? They don't even have a list of demands.
Right.
They just have this vague idea of constitutionality. This idea of like we want freedom.
Yeah.
What does that mean? No government, not way. What does that mean?
So what do we call these guys? Is that what we're trying to
Nuts?
decide here?
I don't know. Libertarian activists, I guess what I would call them.
Activists. So you're being pretty kind too, because
Yeah,
a lot of
well,
people want to go straight to terrorist.
Well, terrorist is a word that has lost a degree of meaning.
I don't
Terrorism
think there-
used to just be if you are only doing what you're doing solely for the terror and chaos it's going to cause. And if that's the case, that's clearly not the case here. But then if I want to murder a bunch of civilians,
There's a better definition. It's the use of fear to change political policy.
but see, that's too vague. Because if that's the case, everything that any government ever does that people don't want them to do is definitionally terrorism, because there's a certain degree of fear of what will happen if you don't do it.
But I also think there's
That's-
a connotation of violence in the terrorism one, and you can inspire fear without inspiring violence, like without a violent act. And I think terrorism like assumes there's a violent act where there's.
No, I would say if Anonymous or some bad internet group came out and said, we're going to shut down the power grid in 2 days unless you send us $1 million, that I would call that terrorism, and that's not violent.
Yeah, but that's so Lex Luthor. That's
I know.
almost kind of cool.
Yeah.
But that's extortion.
Yeah.
Is all extortion terrorism?
No.
Well, all extortion preys upon the fear of the consequences of
Well,
what
because
you're
they are
extorting.
different laws. Like that would really seriously fall under extortion more than anything else. Like you do this or we'll do that. Like
Terrorism is the new boogeyman. And
I, like these guys didn't necessarily use fear. It's not like they went in and stormed a downtown federal building
No.
where
There
they
was
hold
no one
courts.
there.
They're
There's no
not-
hostages,
They're not
you
holding
know.
hostages.
Yeah.
They're just occupying a space and being huge douchebags.
Yeah. And they'll just be humiliated at the end of this. Like,
and they
the only problem with the government's approach, the right approach, which is just starve them out basically till they walk out peacefully. The only problem with that is it makes quote unquote the government look weak, and it encourages this type of thing to happen again. But I don't believe in that whole don't do the wrong thing because. Don't do the right thing because it'll make you look weak argument. I hate that. And the whole criticism of Obama's foreign policy, I don't sound like I agree with it 100%, but the whole criticism is it makes us look weak. It's leading from behind. I'm like, no, it's called diplomacy. It's called subtlety. You want coalitions of other nations. Because when we act alone, it makes everyone else hate us. So let's try to work together with other countries. But anyway.
But this is inside. So like,
I don't.
so
I'm
what
just
was
saying.
our end game of this discussion? Are we trying to decide how to deal with these?
Yeah,
dudes?
now I am asking.
Like okay, so
Just starve them out, negotiate with them, find out what they want, and just wait. End it peacefully. Let's not have anyone shot, please.
I do think that there's a difference between that which is wrong and that which is less preferable. I would prefer that this end without bloodshed and end peacefully. I would not, however, if they stormed it and shot them all, I wouldn't say that was wrong. I would say it was less
Eddie,
preferable.
That's wrong.
Right. So
That's wrong.
philosophically, we should just let criminals do what they want. I mean, that's what that position says. Do what they want and then end it peacefully.
You sound like Bill O'Reilly talking.
No,
about it. What are you
no,
talking about?
no, no.
Let them do what they want. I didn't
think
say
he's
that.
not. I think he's not. Well, that's a pretty extreme thing to jump to, but I think he got a little defensive.
Yeah.
But I don't think he's saying like he's not advocating to storm the building and fuck shit up, but he's saying if that's what happens to a certain degree, like
philosophically, how can you say they're wrong?
You wanted a fight. You went in there saying you wanted one.
I'm talking about just the philosophy underpinning it. I'm not saying you're really in favor of letting criminals do what they want, but what's the philosophy that says they're criminals, they're doing a wrong thing, they have guns, they're pointing guns at us?
The philosophy is that the government use of force should be literally the last resort, not just use that as a catchphrase, but the real policy is that we've tried everything else. We've contacted their families to contact them to help convince them. We've asked them what their demands are. We've done all those negotiating tactics for several days even. And then, even then, to go in with guns ablazing without them attacking you is not. The government should behave more maturely than if Bryan was occupying my bathroom with a gun, I might go in there and try to shoot him to get him out eventually. But the government should be better than me. They're going to win this in the end anyway. The balance of power is completely crazy.
Yeah,
it is completely crazy. And I see your point about trying other things first.
It's the same reason I'm against the death penalty, right? So I believe that some people deserve to die morally from their crimes. And yet, I believe the government in an ideal world should not have that power to execute that moral good, to execute that person and to enforce that moral good. Even though the rapist, killer, bad guy deserves to die, and the best thing for everyone would be if he dies, the government still...
Why?
Because I don't believe governments should have that power over their citizens.
Why?
Because they're not individuals. They shouldn't... You can't let an institution exercise that level of power. That's because I think it's inherent to the American experiment, which is checks and balances on government power.
You know, it's weird that that's one of the, if you go back to like Hammurabi's code, murder and like capital crimes were like big shit like that was one of the first things that they addressed as a government. It was one of the first laws.
Yeah.
So that goes back to like, so you're challenging like one of the literally possibly the oldest law on the book.
From a practical standpoint, I 100% agree because I do think that governments usually suck. But I think a lot of things are a tension between that which is true in the real world, wherein the legal system has its problems and often and we have to balance, and then the principle. The principle of the death penalty is sound, and everybody who's ever tried to argue against it, it's nonsense. In isolation.
Wait, what? No. The principles the arguments for it are easily refuted. The deterrence argument that's
a terrible argument.
The idea that the death penalty deters criminals because it scares them. It is not. It is nonsense. It's not.
But you
true.
just said it was a moral good in principle.
What was?
To have
the
certain
death penalty.
People die.
There are certain people who justly deserve to die. That's how you just started this conversation.
No. It's completely incorrect to tell me that I just said that the death penalty is a moral good. I said the death of that person is a moral good.
That's what I just said.
No, you said the death penalty, which is a government execution. I don't believe in that. I believe that person dying is a good thing.
That person being killed is a good thing.
Right.
It's a moral good.
Right.
You just don't trust the government to get that right.
But in principle, and I agree with not trusting the government, actually. In practice, it is incredibly problematic, and I'm actually generally in favor of abolishing it. But in principle, in the ideal world that doesn't exist, in the ideal world, if we knew that the government was only getting the people that deserved it, it would be a moral good.
No, it wouldn't.
Yes, it would.
Here's an analogy. Bryan steals $10 from me.
Why's it got to be me, man?
I don't know. Bryan steals $10 from me. Then you, on your own, for your own motivations, go out and steal $10 from Bryan. Now, it's a moral good that Bryan loses $10 in the future because he stole it from me. It is, however, immoral for you, Eddie, to go steal $10 from him. Even though it's a good thing for $10 to be taken, he doesn't deserve those $10. It's still wrong for you to do it. The government,
hold on.
The government is not the injured party when they execute the murderer.
But the government is, in theory, representing the injured party. But John, if you two both agree, if John and Bryan both agree that I am the arbiter, and Bryan steals $10 from John, and so I take $10 from Bryan and give it to John, you voted me the arbiter. I'm the arbiter. That's what government's for. The government is supposed to be our arbiter.
But isn't the government the victim? I mean, if I get killed, I can't earn for them anymore. I can't pay into their coffers. I can't be a force of labor.
Yeah, they're the victim of a
I can't
loss.
spend myself on a foreign
Yeah,
battlefield.
the government's victim of a loss of revenue.
Right.
But is the loss of revenue
No, I'm just
worthy of death?
John, I'm fucking with you. All right, I'm just fucking. Mark's not here. Somebody has to troll this
Someone has to fill
motherfucker
the
every
role.
once in a while.
You have to derail it.
Every once in a while.
Arguments against the death penalty can be equally applied to any kind of penalty for a crime.
But,
so you
but,
can
but killing, but killing people deserves an extra level of scrutiny.
Why?
Right. Well, the death penalty.
Why does murder should be deliberated more heavily than like taxation or imprisonment?
No, we're talking about imprisonment because that's usually what we do. So why is it different? Now, we're talking in an ideal world where we know they're guilty, where this is true. Like, this is a person that you've identified as the world would be better if they were dead.
Because there's an existential value to life that that rises above someone's freedom.
Which they've thrown away if they have killed someone themselves.
By your reasoning, by your reckoning, I don't. Not everyone might agree that.
So
I mean, some
I
people
feel your
might
line
think that
becomes arbitrary. Freedom is important. You're saying that freedom is somehow like. So if I imprisoned you for the rest of your life, it wouldn't be as bad as murdering you.
It's not
Oh,
arbitrary.
please kill me, dude. Like, I'd rather be killed.
It's not arbitrary. The life,
Well,
the
arbitrary
line
in the
between
sense
life
of-
and death is a clearly distinguished from your.
So
your
what are you saying? Should I have a saying about what happens to me over your $10, or should you have it, or what? Who gets the say?
Well, laws are instituted
Which are
for that purpose.
Yeah.
I'm so lost. So are we on to the death penalty now, or are we still talking about psychos in Oregon? Like, where are we going?
I don't know. You tell me.
Because I don't necessarily disagree with what Eddie said. If they
About what?
if they decided to go up,
Oh.
run up in there and
Yeah.
blow these guys up, I couldn't be like, well, that was 100% out of line. I mean, it wouldn't. I wouldn't say that's what I would have done, but I couldn't say, well, they totally fucking screwed that pooch because these dudes went in there armed, like in a group,
Right.
which I would consider outright straight up a militia. Let's just call it that.
Yeah.
This is a group of citizens that got together, armed the fuck up, went somewhere, took some space that wasn't theirs, occupied it, and said, "We're prepared to fight to the death if you come fuck with us." Well, dude,
Well, it gets
you are picking a fight with the United States government.
It gets down to details, though. Because did they ever point a gun at any of the cops?
Well,
Did they ever, So it gets down to that. Like if
nobody's
they
in imminent danger,
right? If they
but
threaten the
you're
life of a law enforcement officer, then I could
You're-
see.
Well, but if they rush in, obviously the presumption would be if they rush in, it would be like get on the ground, and
Yeah.
then it's going to be like if they're shooting, one would hope that
Yeah,
we
but
don't
that-
shoot first, or
that's-
the government doesn't shoot first.
right, but that's where it gets really hairy. You can't hold people to anything once that happens. So I'm saying don't do that. Don't force yourself into the situation where it's going to be.
What it amounts to is 100 up to 150 possibly armed trespassers on government property saying,
Yeah.
"Fuck you, we're not leaving. We'll kill you if you come to get
And
us
what
out."
if they
Like,
have crates of food? We don't. I mean, 'cause they won't tell you what they got. So what if they do? What if they could stay there for 10 years? They're occupying federal land for 10
So
years.
I'll take it a step.
When do you?
I'll take
rush
it a step further because by renouncing the laws of the land, aren't you in a way renouncing your citizenship? So what if it was non-citizens doing this? If it was a group of people who were say here illegally and they took over like a goddamn government-run food bank or something while there were no people there,
Yeah.
but they're like, we're not leaving.
Yeah.
We'll fucking kill anybody who comes, but we're not threatening you right now. Like it.
Well, did they say that we'll kill anybody?
They said we're prepared to fight to the death, something along those lines.
Really?
Like, yeah. It's not friendly what they're saying.
Yeah, well, they said I think they said we don't want to hurt anyone, but we're prepared to if we have to.
Why is it so hard to like fire canisters of like a sedative like into the place like that?
And it's hard to
I would be
calculate the
surprised
numbers.
to
Plus,
see these guys have gas masks because they would be if they're prepared militia. They're going to have to know that the cops are going to use gas.
Yeah.
I mean, I think Brian and I both agree with you that it would be better but
Yeah.
it's just when you sit there going like. When you sit there saying it would be wrong if they rushed in, I question that. I mean, these are criminals, and if you say it would be wrong
Well, I
to
think
rush
what I was
in-
saying is at this stage, knowing what we know, it's the wrong time for that.
Right.
And like I said
But
a
I
few
think-
times after that, if things escalated further, then I would look at that option. But I'm just saying right now,
How
it's
much patience is the government required to have? Required now, as opposed to I would prefer lots of patience. I agree.
I just want to
does
see
your
a-
Google know how long either of those other standoffs lasted? Like, how
can
long
find
did they
out.
stand off with those guys at Wounded Knee in 71? How long did they stand off at Alcatraz in 73? Like,
I just want to see a good faith effort to end it peacefully. That's my whole
I don't
point.
think anybody disagrees.
Yeah.
Not at this table.
Right.
I'm sure there's.
So Hillary Clinton got in trouble a couple weeks ago for saying that Trump that ISIS and terrorist groups were using Trump recordings of Donald Trump in their recruitment videos, because obviously liberals have been saying for a long time now, when you say inflammatory shit like ban all Muslims from the country, that plays into the hands of terrorists who want to convince the world's 1.5 billion Muslims that we hate them and that ISIS is their friend. They want to recruit those guys. So she got criticized because there was no evidence that Trump had been used in a video by a terrorist group, but now they made one. So this one Al-Qaeda affiliate terrorist group made a video, a 51-minute recruitment video, and they got recordings of Trump in there pounding the pulpit and calling for all kinds of, restrictions on Muslims. So I guess she probably feels vindicated. But the truth is that these terrorist groups have used recordings of her and Bill Clinton and Obama in their recruitment videos too. Yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to tell the audience that when John told us about this earlier, both Eddie and I at the same time, when John told us that ISIS used Trump in a terror recruitment video, we both said at the exact same time, well, Trump is terrifying.
Or terrible. Yeah. So that's an interesting tidbit. I don't know if there's much there. I had a little bit of a strange incident. We could call it anger management with John Berger.
Let's do that.
I was driving down First Avenue on New Year's Eve, I think. And no, it was the day before. And I see on the sidewalk 2 firefighters, a male and a female, grappling furiously with a very large man and wrestling with him standing up more or less. And I slowed down and was staring and watching, and I was like, God, this is pretty hairy. It's just the 2 of them. Neither of those firefighters was very big. And I pulled over and I was like, man, do I get involved? If it was 2 cops, no, I would not have done anything, because they're just going to end up shooting me. I just have watched too many videos. And anyway, they have weapons to subdue people. So they're probably going to be okay. But 2 firefighters, so I stopped and I ran over. And one of them the firefighters had executed a great hip throw on the guy and taken him down. And they were laying on him, but he was still thrashing about wildly. So I ran up and helped to restrain the guy. And as I approached, I said, hey, do you guys need help? And they just didn't answer. I was like, do you need help? And they didn't answer. And I was like, I'm helping you. I was like, I'm going to help you. And they just allowed that. And I helped them to hold him down a little. And I was trying to also calm him down and de-escalate the situation. I was like, calm down, buddy. I was like, stop fighting these guys. They're trying to help you, blah, blah, blah. But he never said a word. He was just like gargling vomit out of his mouth and like moaning and stuff. And so I tried to keep like pressure off of his rib cage, because he didn't sound like he was breathing too well. But he was like, I think he was probably just exhausted from the fight. So I just helped them hold him down using some jujitsu restraint techniques until the cavalry showed up. About 5 more firefighters showed up, and a couple cops who were just. All the firefighters were holding the guy down. The cops were just kind of milling around like lazily, not getting involved, even though it was still ongoing. And the female firefighter opened up her kit and had a bunch of syringes and jammed something into the guy to calm him down. Cocktail of some sort, I would expect. And
that's kind of weird.
To sedate him, I guess.
You're a medic. How many times do you administer medication without getting the call?
Oh no! These days we don't have to. We
really?
Don't have to call. No, we have there's a semantics issue of the difference between standing orders and administrative orders. Technically, they're the same goddamn thing.
Right.
But
yeah.
in this state and town, administrative orders generally mean they expect you to use your own judgment for the most part, and then you just call in whatever administrative order you have used. Whereas with standing orders, most
which
of the time
like a sedation for transport.
Yeah, I mean
would that be one?
All right, shop talk. So, and then as I'm holding the guy down, traffic's like really slowing down to watch the action, and there's a crowd joining around and everything. And then 2 cars collide on the street to make it even more chaotic, smash into each other. And then those people get out, and then traffic, and then there's fire trucks there, and it's just a madhouse. It was like the last day of shopping or something before New Year's, so there was lots of traffic and people around. man, it was pretty hairy, but
No good deed goes unpunished.
it just reminded me of psych, working in the psych hospital, and I just didn't want to see those firefighters get hurt, man, because this guy was really going after them, and like I said, one of them was a 5'5" female who was freaking a badass at the end of the day. She did everything perfectly, and I know a lot of female psych techs and stuff, and males too, who would have just like, they'd been like, let him go, like they just release themselves from the situation. Smartly, wisely, because they could get hurt. But she was right on this guy, helping the other guy fight him, and so I always thought firefighters are some of the biggest heroes in the world. I've always considered that, So and this was another case of that happening, and I honestly didn't really do much or contribute much. I think they pretty much had him under control, more or less. But this guy was strong, I'll tell you. But
there's a thing about firefighters. Somebody said to me once, and he was a firefighter, but he's like, yeah, everybody says that we're not that smart because everybody's running this way and we're running that way. And he's like, sometimes we run the other way too, but when we do, we're carrying you.
Yeah, in other words, running towards the fire is what they do, while other people run away.
He says if you see us running away, we're running away because we just got you out.
Right,
we're getting you to help.
Yeah. So
you would you not have helped if you said you wouldn't have helped if it was two cops? What if it was two lady cops?
Yeah.
Or if they were getting their ass kicked.
Yeah. If two cops were getting their ass kicked, then that'd be scary, man. For now me to go one-on-one with the guy. But yeah.
I've seen a lot of cops that didn't know how to grapple at all, dude, and that's why they were getting owned.
Yeah. If he didn't have a weapon and he was, I probably, knowing myself, would have, if he ran away, I wouldn't chase him. But if I would probably try to get in there and take him down if he was beating them up, because I thought that's what was the next thing, was him beating the shit out of these firefighters. That's what I saw in my mind's eye.
May very well have been.
Yeah,
he was probably scared if he wasn't outright angry.
And there's something in me like my point about the cops is my instinct isn't like to be the hero and get involved always, because I see the moral gray area. I don't know what this guy did, if he deserves to be detained, but if he's fighting firefighters, that meant there was some medical emergency and he's reacting negatively to it, and he's fighting these guys. Like, they're not arresting him. Like, maybe he's an illegal and he doesn't want them to detain him at all because he knows the cops will get involved and he'll get deported. I don't know. There's all kinds of possibilities, but I just did not.
It might be a psych transport too. A lot of times they jump out, and if he's court ordered, they might try to hold him down.
Right.
That's pretty brave.
Okay. If he's court ordered, it wouldn't have been two people. Odds are, given what you just described, it sounds like if she had drugs, she was a medic unit, not an alpha unit.
There was an ambulance there.
Yeah, there was an ambulance there. An alpha unit would be a pickup truck. Since they only sent a medic, what that was most likely was someone either. I would wager he may have been asleep. Just because if it was, I've run the call of someone starting fights in traffic, for example. They're not the way dispatchers key things. It depends on what they send.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, situations can change on the fly. So they heard it was a guy who looks dead on a bus stop, and it turns out later he's actually gorked out of drugs and really that was my first thought.
Like,
no, it was drugs. it was drugs.
The throwing up, the fact that he threw up and stuff, probably. Yeah.
Well, it was combative with people who are universally known to be there to help you.
Yeah,
that's a good sign that you're not thinking clear either.
Right.
The homeless community in Tucson and the Tucson Fire Department do not always have the most cordial of relationships.
Right.
And that's not entirely due to the actions of the
fire department.
No.
Oh, you're saying they're not always the good guys? Yeah. Well, I'm sure. I believe you, yeah.
Trying not to make too many comments on that score.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen Bringing Out the Dead?
Yeah. I own the book and the movie.
I didn't know it was a book. I saw the movie and I'm like, oh, God, that's like 2 painful hours. Yeah, it's a good movie, but it's
it's a good movie?
Depressing.
Mother Jugs and Speed.
Never seen
Never
that.
heard of it.
American Ultra.
There's 2 ambulance movies. One is Bringing Out the Dead, and one is much older. It's got Raquel Welch. It's got Harvey Keitel, and it's got a douchebag rapist, and it's called It's called Mother, Jugs, and Speed, and it's a goofy movie. That's a goofy fun movie, as opposed to Bringing Out the Dead, which is relentlessly depressing.
Oh, it is relentlessly depressing. It's like The Road.
Bryan, you were polled for the first time this week.
I was polled.
You got a phone call on your
Whoa,
cell phone?
whoa.
No, I got it. It was
TMI.
an email poll.
Oh.
But I was polled, and I think I may have probably, because it was an email poll, I might have gotten them before and just deleted them right away. But
Oh.
it said it was a poll, so I answered it. And I've never had one say that it was a poll before. So I did answer it. And
What did it ask you?
The question was, with Trump running away with the Republican nomination or something to that effect, who do you think is the best suited person to represent the Democrats?
That's odd. Like, why isn't the question who would you support as a Democratic candidate for president?
I think that goes back to maybe what your friend said about the party, and it's not being like the best necessarily the Democratic Party supporting the best candidate. It's supporting the one that can win.
And the one that it has financial ties to and other things too. But yeah,
I know. I'm just
Yeah.
paraphrasing your buddy, because he shook that down like it's not. This is their job. The party's job is to put a winning candidate
Right.
out there, not necessarily give you the best one.
Right.
It's to maintain their control of the office.
Right.
And
So what'd you answer, if you want to tell us? You don't have to.
I told him I thought Bernie Sanders was the best guy, because I don't. It's between him and Hillary,
Right.
and I don't.
Trump
I think the last thing we need is another Clinton in office,
Look,
another Bush in office,
Yeah.
another Republican in office,
If it
another
is-
Democrat in office. I'm tired of getting what we're getting, which is a shit sandwich.
If it is
I don't like the taste.
Trump versus Hillary, Trump has a lot of ammo against her. Not that he would ever win, but he could do okay. Maybe he could win because he has ammo against her. He can say, "Hey, Hillary, you voted for the Iraq War. I didn't vote for shit. I was against it publicly. Trump was." So he has a liberal attack on her. She's not even consistent with her own values. He can attack her for
Wait, now to be fair, I would argue she really doesn't have many of her own values.
Yeah, she doesn't have any value. You're right. But I'm saying he's positioned to hit her on those issues. He's got nothing policy-wise to attack Bernie on. I mean, he can say, I'm a conservative, you're a horrible socialist, so fuck you. But he actually has ammo, as all Republicans do, against Hillary.
Well, for me, I think it's more self-serving though, because I was so fed up with the Democrats and the Republicans, and we had talked about this, and my solution was to always vote for the other guy and get them out and remind them that it's of the people, for the people, by the people. You work for us, so work for us, or we'll fucking find somebody else to do it, and we'll vote you out. And I think, now Beef and I would probably disagree here, because he's a Democrat. Bernie's not a Democrat. He's an independent. He always has been.
Well, he's a Democrat now.
He picked
No,
it
he's
for
not.
strategic
He's
reasons.
not a registered Democrat.
Yes, he is. He has to be. He is.
Well, people
he
really-
registered this year,
Okay.
last year.
Oh, really?
Either way, and
He has to be to run for there.
I'll address that. Now everybody's like,
My bad.
because I've heard people argue against you, like, well, if Bernie can't play the system to win, then he doesn't deserve to. Well,
Right.
he is playing the system to the degree that he became a Democrat so that he could run
Right.
without having to do all this shit to get on the ballot in the states. So
Well,
to a degree, he is playing that.
Yeah.
But he's not a Democrat, and he's not a Republican. Not in reality. He's always been an independent.
Longest serving independent
And so I would
congressman
have
of
what
all
I was
time.
saying to people that they should have is vote these Democrats and
To be
Republicans
fair, though-
out of the White House and put a third party in there, and keep doing that everywhere. Vote them all out. Get rid of them. Does anybody agree we're getting good government? So then get rid of them. We'll vote new people in. And if you don't do
My
a good
only
job, we'll
concern-
vote you out.
my
It's a
only
revolution
concern-
by vote.
Yeah, no, and I get that, but the problem is, a big problem is, I feel, not enough, and the Republicans don't have this problem right now. But generally speaking, not enough people run for office. Not enough people want to
Yeah.
participate in government. Because, this whole, don't vote for the incumbent. Well, if the incumbent is the best choice, that's who you should vote for. You should not vote for the guy, if you got an incumbent who's like, well, I'm a standard incumbent, shitty general, shitty government, whatever. And then a guy who's like, I like Hitler. That Hitler guy had some good ideas, and fuck all you people. Don't vote for him just because the other person is the incumbent,
Yeah.
Well, here's what I'm saying.
I'm not saying that that's what you're saying.
No.
Yeah.
What both sides seem to agree on, the far parts of both sides, is that some type of revolution is necessary and coming. Well, what happens in a revolution is either one
The old
dude in
order
there,
gets
they
overthrown.
just take them all out. It all goes. And I'm saying everybody's calling. There's more tension rising and more tension rising. If we actually got together as people, voted all these fools out, and sat down reasonably at the table, it's a revolution by vote. Nobody has to. It doesn't have to be crazy.
Right, but now
Right.
you have to look at each candidate, I think, is the point, though. Just it's not just everyone in office because they're in office deserves to go. It's just like this whole eye-rolling attitude towards politicians. It's been a favorite pastime of Americans and everyone else for 150 years.
No, it's been a favorite pastime.
Politicians,
You know
they're all
what,
dogs.
though, dude? Those
And
guys that were good for it, they can run again in 4 years, and we'll vote them back in.
Right,
But,
right.
But how does that help the situation?
well,
If your only criteria is vote for someone who's not currently in office,
Send-
that's a little random.
it's, well,
Arbitrary.
yeah, it is
Arbitrary.
random, but I think what I'm saying is that overall, 100%, I don't believe we're getting good government. So,
But don't you think you could find
But
one
when
or
you say it's a
two-
revolution, you know, when you have a revolution, you
That's
substitute
Bernie's
a
word,
new
by the
government.
way, yeah.
Well, it was also Ron Paul's word. But you know, when you say you're having a revolution, you are going to be substituting one thing for another, right? When the French Revolution substituted,
Bryan was giving some credence to the idea that almost that arbitrary approach is that sweep the whole thing out because that itself teaches a lesson, and it teaches that.
and that's what I'm talking about,
Yeah.
teaching a lesson that you work for us.
Yeah, you've not.
How
been-
does
And
that
if you
teach
guys
a lesson?
can't find a way to
if
work
you put
together,
someone in the office who, say, for example, isn't in office now, but says, I don't really care about the people. So you've got the guy who's like, I'm going to lie to you and say I do, and kind of sort of do, but like not. I'm
well,
going to be a
we
state of
see
government.
that we get rid of you too.
After he's elected.
Well, we're not doing very well now, bro.
I know,
What
but
I'm
I'm not
saying
seeing
is
how
that
yours
all-
is better.
Because it's a forced fucking change. It's absolutely forced. Everything has to change because we got rid of all of you. You want dramatic change? You do a dramatic thing.
Yeah, but it's like.
But look what happened to the French Revolution. Like, that did not go well.
I think it just needs to be.
Does a revolution ever really fucking go
Yes.
well?
No.
Ours did.
Would you rather it be
yeah,
by
okay.
vote, where we vote everyone out, or where we actually end up with one and we have to rebuild a fucking country of dead people and bury our brothers and sisters? I'd rather just vote the fucking clowns out and have the good ones come back
Yeah,
and
but
get
I think Eddie's
reelected in
just
a
saying
few years.
those aren't the only
no,
two
I get.
options.
Obviously, they're not the only two options.
Yeah.
But I'm not. I'm never going to sit here and have somebody tell me that my idea is 100% fucking stupid and not say anything back because it's not.
Whoa. I didn't say your idea was 100%.
If you're saying it won't help anything, then it's 100% stupid.
I said I could not see how it would help, and I.
An
Yeah. He's
abject
not
lesson
saying-
fucking helps sometimes. When you yank the rug out from under the bully, it fucking helps.
But if you give so you punch one bully in the face and then immediately turn around and give your lunch money to the worst bully,
Right.
you
His
offer
point
yourself
is
a
that-
huge opportunity for change.
Well, his point. Well, my point is there's two senators that I like, and that's because of my ideological
Ooh.
approach.
Warren and Sanders.
Warren and Sanders, and so I wouldn't be happy, if
I
they.
like Leahy actually.
I'm not sure who that is, but and then
Patrick Leahy is the other Vermont. He's one of the other Vermont Congress people. I'm not actually sure which.
I actually did know who he was.
yeah.
He ran for something briefly.
Anyway, we'll move on a little bit. Bernie raised $33 million in the last quarter. Hillary, 37. He's right on her tail, man. It's crazy how much he's raking in from.
I'd like to see a comparison of Ron Paul, and I'm not trying to equate them because I do think they occupy different spots on the spectrum. But I would like to just see a comparison,
like how much he had raised at this time.
Yeah,
in
how they were
2008.
doing I don't think as well. I honestly don't
It's
think as
not,
well
no.
because he also wasn't taken as seriously by the media. But
plus,
I'm
he
interested.
was
I'm
wait.
interested.
What? Oh, the last time he was running as a Republican. The time before that, he ran third party, right? Or has it always been Republican in recent history?
I honestly can't tell you. I thought
I'm not the biggest fan of Ron Paul. So
The point is, like,
Didn't he run as a libertarian once?
Yeah, I think he did once as an independent or a libertarian.
I think it was one or the other. I'm probably wrong.
I know
honestly,
last
but
time
I
he was a Republican.
Yeah.
But in the same way, Bernie's a Democrat. He's like, well, I got to get on the ballot. I got to get you. My point is, if he was running as an independent, he didn't make shit in terms of money compared to Bernie.
Now I could be wrong too. I'm wrong a lot. I'm not very bright, but I believe Ron Paul has always been a Republican.
You got a little shine. You got a little shine. You're fairly bright, man.
Yeah,
Shining.
You got a little
I
shine.
don't know about that.
I smell oranges.
But anyway, so yeah, Bernie's raking in a lot of money, basically the same amount as Hillary, except
It's
then
not
she's
coming
got
from a super PAC.
right. But that he's making the same amount as her in campaign contributions. Super PACs are another thing because you're not allowed to be associated with the super PAC, and that so there's another $30 million at least that she made during that time from super PACs. So it's not, but the amount he's making from just individual donations, it's incredible. It's really inspiring, man. So
what's interesting to me is now super PACs are supposed to be separate from the candidate, right?
Yep.
Now we all know they aren't, but they're supposed to be.
Well, they are legally, but yeah.
Where's Bernie's? If it was really separate,
no,
somebody would have done it without him.
That's a great question. I can answer that. They have. The 2 or 3 super PACs have started that for Bernie, and he had to call the dudes and be like, please disassemble this organization. And they did.
I actually am not a big fan of that.
I am, man. It shows principle. And character. It really does.
No.
And that's what sets him apart in this.
Well, the principle was my whole argument for the upheaval.
No, because he's not supposed to be involved.
Eddie, a politician turning down money effectively, that's important.
Principle.
A politician telling a super PAC what to do and publicly admitting that and saying that's my principles. I'm going to tell this super PAC, which legally is supposed to be separate from me. And
there's nothing illegal about him calling the guy and going, please disband.
Well, because they disband immediately after. But the principle does not make sense. If the principle is supposed to be that they're separate, if that's the legal
You're allowed
principle,
to talk to them
and tell them what to do.
Well, it's like this.
Yeah, only if you're telling them to go away, to disassemble. Yes, because
I'm not as opposed to that as I would be to something like truly unethical. But my point is, I don't think that's a very high principle.
It's just technical.
To be able to say no thank you to money,
you're being
for a politician to turn down money based on his political principles. Yeah,
that it's unconstitutional for those super PACs to exist.
I'm honestly not sure. I'm aware of it happening previously in my lifetime.
It's never.
It's a good shtick.
Oh my God! It's.
I'll tell you what. Here, look. Can I just say this?
Yeah.
I would. Man, it's never going to be my shtick to turn down $30 million as a shtick.
Yeah.
Exactly. I'll tell you that. I'm going to find a different fucking shtick real fucking quick if that's my current one.
I'll make it make sense.
Especially if everybody's consensus on both sides is that I need this money to win.
Before we talk about Bryan's exciting article that he story, this is kind of apropos. I invested $20 last night in this site called Predict It, and it's a gambling site, although they would tell you otherwise. And it's you gamble on political outcomes. So they have different bets on there basically, and it says one of them that I gambled on was Trump will have.
How legal is this? Should you be saying hypothetically you gave $20?
It's legal because of the way they do it. So one of the bets was on January 31st, Trump will have at least 35% of the vote on RealClearPolitics.com aggregated primary polling.
So 35% of the Republican vote.
Correct. Yeah, okay. And which is exactly what he has right now on Real Clear Politics. 35.
How much you gonna make if you win?
I'll make like $7.
Hey.
Yeah, I think that's what I bet because it was like a 50-50 bet, I think. So I stand to gain exactly what I bet. And I said no. I said he will not be at 35. He'll be lower because I think as we draw closer to actually voting, and also because of this story about terrorists using Trump in their video, I think that's going to look bad for him. Now, nothing so far has brought him down. So I could be wrong, but I think because January, the next day is when the Iowa primary is, I think. It's that week, the first week of February.
Yeah.
So the voting's going to be real soon at that time. And I've thought this whole time that after Christmas is when America will be like, maybe not Trump. That's
the problem is, though, who are they going to replace him with? They're all crazy.
Oh, yeah. Well, from our perspective, but if we're Republicans, we have to find some guy to vote for. There's Cruz and there's Rubio.
Out of that Republican clown car, there has to be a clown that's not quite as scary.
There is, but the clowns that I don't think are as scary are clowns that like are so low on the totem pole. I don't think they even have a chance.
Good.
Yeah.
The fact that I like Lindsey Graham more than any of the people, like Lindsey fucking Graham.
I think Kasich is the one I
like. Kasich.
Graham was the one Republican who said
he was like, I know I'm not going to win this, but like. Why is Donald Trump like he was like, this is ridiculous. Donald Trump is awful. So I'm going to stay in this as long as it takes to keep pointing that out.
He had one important policy that he supported and none of the others did that I agreed with. Sorry, guys, I can't remember. But anyway, Yeah, I think Cruz or Rubio, Cruz is in second place, Rubio's in third. I think they're going to come up, and one of them's going to win it. I don't know. It's going to be a mess. Might be a contested convention at the Republican National Convention, but
that's going to be good TV, I bet.
Yeah.
I hope it's on the networks instead of because I've been having trouble watching the debates since they're not on TV. I can just get, and all the streaming solutions seem to be a pain in my ass.
Isn't that lovely democracy where if you want to see a debate for your presidential candidate, but you don't have cable or you don't have network TV, which you can't watch it until like a couple days later when someone pirates it and puts it on YouTube like illegally. Like, you can't watch it unless you have access to that. It's like, oh, that's great.
I feel like the various... I would prefer if the parties did not have a host and then they made a licensing agreement like ESPN has with like the NFL. We're going to post this on our thing. Like I the fact that I can't just go to the Democrat or Republican website and just view the goddamn debate.
Yeah.
Who the hell am I picking? I don't know.
Yeah.
And I'm interested in politics.
Another similar issue is election day.
Point.
Election day should be a federal holiday, but it's not.
Absolutely should.
Every other country,
so that every single person has a fucking chance to vote.
What's the argument against that?
Hold on.
Go ahead.
Now it does vary by place, by
state.
They're supposed to let you out of work long enough to do it. Okay.
I had a long argument. At one point I had a long argument with the company because
Eddie, say it ain't so.
Yeah, I had a long argument with the company about the concept of voting because they wanted to put in our labor agreement that employees are encouraged to use mail-in ballots rather than take the time off that they're legally entitled to. And I was like, we're not putting that in the contract. Fuck you.
Yeah,
I mean nicely. I
just think
nicely.
a better solution is
but
federal holiday, no work on that day. You go vote.
Well, but the problem is that there are even on
jobs
federal
you can't
holidays.
stop, like
even on
private
federal
companies.
holidays,
Yeah.
like
But the point is, allow more people to vote. Let's work toward.
It still should be a holiday.
Yeah, and I think everyone should be registered to vote automatically at 18 years old too.
When they make you register for the draft,
right?
You should just be
if you're a man.
automatically registered to vote.
If you're a woman, you don't have to register for the draft.
The only
is there an equality argument in there?
they opened up all combat positions to women,
So
women
then
still can't be drafted.
Register for the draft at 18.
But
then,
there's
ladies?
a law against the draft, isn't there? There is no draft that was repealed. I mean,
you still when you turn 18,
the draft
you still
has
have
to be
to
authorized.
register for
It's
it.
not that there's a law against it; it's that it is not in place.
Right.
There was no legislative action since Vietnam that canceled the government.
Canceled the draft, yes. But
Yeah.
what I'm saying is,
They could bring it back.
like, you have to authorize it, and then let new legislation deauthorizes
So when you
it,
turn
but-
18, you still have to go register, right?
I
for the
did.
draft, yeah.
Oh
I
yeah,
did.
selective.
That's how I got all those
service
sweet
Selective
student loans.
service,
That
yeah.
oh wait, I didn't get any.
Yeah, in case you're selected for
itself.
service.
Right, yeah.
They'd look at mine now and be like, "Oh no, it's like we don't even have enough money to get him running right."
Bryan, hit us with this fascinating story you read.
Yeah, I'm going to give credit. Kelly Mitchell posted this. It was just like a picture with a little story about how this happened. So I looked it up and researched it further. And the lady's name's Julianne Kepke, and I think that's how you say it. And for a while, like late 60s, early 70s, she lived with her father and mother in Peru or Ecuador, at a research facility. So she kind of grew up in the jungle. She knew a little bit about survival skills and stuff, which plays into her story. And her mother and her caught a plane. I don't even know where they were going, honestly, but somewhere over Peru, they got into a pretty intense storm. The plane was struck by lightning. And
What kind of plane is this?
Some type of passenger plane.
I think it was like a charter
71.
flight.
Yeah,
It was kind of like a Cessna. No, I think it was like a Cessna.
I think it had
like, I mean, it
props.
wasn't a Cessna, but it was like a Cessna.
Well,
Piper Club.
there were
Piper Club.
there were rows of seats because
Yeah.
that plays into it later.
Yeah.
So
Small passenger plane.
Small passenger plane.
Puddle jumper.
So when it got hit by lightning, the last thing she ever heard her mother say was, "Well, that's the end. It's over," and the plane starts plummeting.
Wow.
And she passes out. She comes to, and she's in a free fall, still strapped in her seat. And she sees the canopy of the jungle like coming towards
Outside
her.
of the plane.
Outside of the plane. She said, I felt so lonely. I could just hear the wind whistling. I was still strapped in my seat. I was just falling towards.
How high?
From 2 miles.
2 miles.
About 2 miles up. So she's falling. She sees the canopy coming. She passes out again. She wakes up alive on the fucking ground.
Oh my God.
She has ruptured a ligament in her knee. She's I think bleeding from the head. She lost a shoe in her glasses. She's got a cut on her forearm, but she's alive.
And just no offense to Bryan to interrupt his story, but the crash occurred on Christmas Eve, 1971, and she was 17.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
17 years old. So she's a young girl.
Yeah. Jeez.
So she's disoriented. She doesn't have her glasses. She only has one shoe, and she says that she was using the shoe to test ahead of her for snakes because there's some that look like leaves, and she knew she was barefoot. They could have killed her.
Wow.
She eventually finds water and remembers her father telling her that if you follow the stream, eventually you'll get to civilization. So she's kind of delirious. She hasn't had really a lot of food or water, but she sees a boat, and she says at first she thinks she's hallucinating. She touches it, and then she does touch it. She's like, oh shit, it's real. Well, she has all these maggots crawling in her wound. She siphons gas from the gas tank, spits it into the wound, starts picking out maggots as they try to dig their way in. She said she pulled out about 30. And then she found a little house there, or some kind of structure, and she passed out in there. Some lumbermen, is how she described them, found her the next day. And they thought she was some river goddess that was part dolphin and was supposed to have white hair because she was blonde.
Wow.
And then she spoke Spanish from being down there. So she greeted them in Spanish and told them what happened.
And they spoke Spanish?
Yeah.
Oh.
And it's
kind of
Peru.
surprising that Spanish speakers down there would be so unfamiliar with a white lady that they would think she was a river goddess.
Maybe they weren't native Spanish speakers. Maybe they were indigenous that learned to speak Spanish, so they were still real superstitious, which I didn't get that deep into it.
Yeah.
But they took her into town, and then on the way out, she found a row of seats with 3 people with their fucking heads stuck in the ground. And she thought that one might be her mother, so she was poking it with a stick to see if they were still alive at all or something. And she noticed that there were painted toenails and that it wasn't her mom. She said it was like an image that she had a hard time shaking.
Yeah.
Eventually, when they found her mom, and I don't know how they determined this, but she survived the fall too.
Really?
Yeah, but couldn't walk, so she died right there.
Oh.
After several days. And I don't know how they determined that, but that was part of the story that the lady was telling in that BBC article that I posted.
So was she...
Usually you can tell... Time of death is actually super interesting, but if it was weeks later, they wouldn't be able to do it based on the normal methods. But what they would see is...
Bugs.
See, if it's weeks later, though...
Which bugs were there? That's what Grissom would say.
But I presume that she died the next day. If bugs, weeks later, bugs won't give you a day or two usually. But what would help is, how did she die? Was it of blood loss?
Right.
If
cause of death.
If the cause of death wound up being blood loss, well, she didn't lose all that blood right after the crash.
When they examined Rasputin's body,
I think it probably ended up them saying exposure or something.
Yeah, and it's that has to take a couple hours.
It was pretty. They were pretty solid on that detail, so I'm sure they did because due diligence of some sort.
Rasputin, the famous mystic in the final royal family of Russia in the 1910s.
Grigory Rasputin.
Yeah. He was poisoned, shot,
stabbed,
and then drowned.
Right.
And when they looked at his body, they saw his lungs were full of water, which meant that he had died only from the drowning at the end.
Which, as we all know, vampires cannot cross running water.
Right. Yeah.
He was a vampire, obviously.
Yeah, clearly.
That goes without saying. Eddie,
clearly.
Thanks for stating the obvious. No, but...
my Captain Obvious pin is in the mail.
So was that woman the only survivor?
Having now
looked it
done
up.
what I do.
Googled it.
Done what I do.
Was she the only survivor?
Yeah, she was the only survivor.
Wow.
But also, the size of the plane, which none of us really knew offhand, I found the number of non-survivors. And I'm trying to see if it was... it's at least 91. I'm just trying to see if she was the 91st or if
so it was like a
92.
medium size.
Yeah, this is like a real plane. I thought it was like a fucking Cessna.
I knew there had been rows of seats.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I've been on puddle jumpers at Burlington International Airport where
25
it's international because they fly to
Mexico.
the 20 minutes
Right.
Canada, the 20 minutes to Canada.
Yeah.
And I've flown on a plane that has less than 50 seats.
Yeah, I was on one of those from Philly to New York in the worst storm. I thought I was going to die, man. I really did. I said something about dying, and I created hysteria on the plane, dude. The stewardess wanted to punch me in the face.
91 other passengers and crew. died.
Jeez Louise.
So it probably held like 80 some odd people, and then this past.
It's the canopy, man. You hit
Well,
that.
she was still in the seat.
And how long was she out there? Was it
10
like
days.
10 days? Yeah, 10 days.
Wow.
What's
10
interesting to
days,
me though
man.
is actually maggots. I don't know.
The wound was
I was
healing.
I was worried about. I was
Well, no,
wondering
maggots
about
are
the
good.
maggots. I know, but I was wondering how long she was laying there to get maggots crawling around.
Well, in the
her
jungle,
wound.
that shit's
Yeah.
going to happen quick, dude.
Yeah, but I would think
If
it'd be
Bryan
ants
walked
or
in the
something.
jungle and just like took a nap,
I could
he'd
have
wake up with
maggots.
maggots all over his toe.
Especially
They'd be all over his toe.
In an
Trying to call
open
him old?
wound, in an open
No, I'm
wound.
saying his toe's an open wound.
Yeah.
Not anymore, dude. That's,
Oh, they'd open it.
it's
That's what maggots do.
solidifying.
No.
Brian's back in a normal shoe, guys. By the way, I know everyone out there in TV land.
Despite the great fall of 2015.
Yeah.
Yeah, I bailed before last week's show, busting my ass on my crutches on the stairs.
So we only got a few minutes left. We got Bill Cosby. He's been arrested for rape, and he posted his $1 million bail. So he's out now, but awaiting trial for rape. It's interesting, and I mean,
And it's worth.
Go ahead.
Just because I did some brief research on this, because I'd heard something about it, but I hadn't looked into it, and then I heard, we might talk about it on the show. So, fast fingers. He was
that was his problem.
no. I think the problem was they weren't fast enough, so he had to drug him.
Yeah.
But it turns out that he was close to the statute of limitations in I want to say Virginia, and so like there was like a 12-year statute of limitations, and he was near it. So it's one of those cases of look. He probably would have gotten away with it, to be honest, if this whole thing hadn't blown up the way it did. And
Assuming
he did
given
it.
up
Well,
on
I mean, to
that
some
whole
extent,
thing.
he has. There are depositions from the 2000s where he admits to what he doesn't think is rape. He just gave women drugs, and then
Yeah.
when they were unconscious, had sex with them.
Yeah.
So, but
yeah, he's settled out of court already for several of these cases.
What's the big deal? We used to call it getting Huxtable.
Right.
oh.
The Spanish fly.
Well, see, you give somebody Quaaludes, you put on a brightly colored sweater. Next thing they don't, I don't know what happened.
yeah.
All right, we really should not make light of this though, because it
Yeah.
is fucked up, and it is.
It's funny though, like
If he did it, he should get what he gets, man.
Speaking of extreme, reactions to things on the internet, there are of course people defending him from the black community, usually saying, here's another example of this upstanding black man who's been taken down by the white man. This refers to something crazy I read yesterday. Most black people are like, fuck that dude.
What's really interesting to me though is I think back now. Apparently these accusations had come out a few times, and the media hadn't really run with them or anything. And you can make a lot of comments about rape culture and the problems in this country, at least, about how we treat women as out, et cetera, et cetera. But
Right.
that said, on a separate subject, I remember he was instrumental in, or at least he was rumored to be instrumental in why Chappelle didn't do his show anymore.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, he was very critical of
Yeah.
all the black comics who he's used dirty language and stuff that he was offended by.
the stories were just so like
Eddie
fucking
Murphy.
Illuminati-esque.
Yeah,
Like, him sitting in a dark room and then somebody's brought before him, kind of thing. I don't know how true it was,
Can I
but
can I tell you guys what offends me? It's not when you use bad words. It's when you rape girls.
yeah.
I find that extremely
Well,
offensive.
that's the whole thing. That's why people are outraged about this. You were this moral, what's the word? Upstanding moral spokesman for the country and for the black community.
Let's do it like this. This might make sense. Rocky Balboa, Dr. Huxtable. They're the same kind of thing. They're like this made-up
Right, an
American ideal.
Right.
Rambo.
But-
Stallone gets two, though. He's got two, like these American ideals.
the guy from Cliffhanger.
Rocky and Rambo.
The guy from Copland. And,
Yeah, it's like
Rambo.
one of
Well,
those-
no, he
it's
was the
like-
bad guy in Copland.
He's like one of those characters.
Was
Yeah.
he? Actually, I
No,
haven't
not
seen Copland.
Stallone. He was.
Yeah, he was the
I
good guy.
actually have not seen Copland in
He
literally a
came-
decade.
Like it's the movie that convinced me that Stallone was actually like he really is a good actor. Like it was a good movie.
He is a good actor.
Yeah.
All right,
He's been in a lot of poor movies, but he's a good actor. I mean,
I was say the same thing about Bruce Campbell.
I don't know who he is.
he wrote
Oh wait, yeah, I do.
Evil Dead
Never mind.
too. He wrote.
I like how you say Evil Dead 2.
Yeah.
Not Evil Dead. That's not the one I'm going to
not
bring
sure
up.
I've even seen Evil Dead. Oh, the 2 is the one I like. And then we got Ethan Couch, this the affluenza kid. So for those of you who don't know, this kid was arrested a couple years ago for driving drunk at 3 times the legal limit, plowing his F-350.
While I believe unlicensed.
Yeah, and on Valium. and or Xanax, one of the two. And he was
They're both benzos. Same
he was
base.
like 16 at the time or something, driving around, rich family, and a car had broken down on the side of the road. And this youth pastor was helping, like, change the tire or whatever. And these two women had come from the neighboring house close by to help this car that had broken down. And this Ethan drives his truck straight into them, kills 4 people, injures 12 more because his truck was full of, kids that he was partying with. And they went flying. And one of them died, I think. And then 3 people died on the side of the road. And then traumatic brain injury and all kinds of other injuries. And he was sentenced to 10 years probation, no prison time. And his lawyer had argued that he was disadvantaged because he had grown up so rich that he didn't know right from wrong, and that his parents were so permissive that they had not instilled normal values in him.
Now,
and he was basically exonerated on those
and
grounds.
I believe the psychiatrist who actually used the term affluenza, which now just because we're speaking here, affluenza
instead of influenza,
right?
So a disease of affluence.
I need to catch that shit. How do you catch affluenza?
Yeah.
Well,
How do
no,
I get that?
I
take a
follow
case of
cases like this, and I like reading the legal theory and stuff and the basics behind it. Now,
If
does
he
anyone
knows,
here?
I want to lick the person who has it. I want to get affluenza.
Does anyone here remember the Twinkie defense?
Right.
No.
It was
Is
a
it
murder.
Zombieland?
No, this is a murder.
No, but that's a fantastic movie, and you will bite your tongue if you have a different opinion.
I love Zombieland. I watch if it's on TV, there's no question what I'm watching right now.
the Bill
It's
Murray
it's my
part.
favorite zombie movie.
The Bill
Or at
Murray
least it's close to.
dude.
I don't know. Actually, I
when
retract that
she
somewhat.
says, "Do you have any regrets?" and he's like, "Garfield, maybe." Like, yes.
Or when he's just sick and they think he's already a zombie.
Or the McDonald's coffee case.
Now,
Hot coffee.
These are legal defenses based on
Legal cases, at least, where where the popular perception is a degree of ridiculously. Now, I'm not going to defend affluenza per se. A lot of the times, the Twinkie defense was actually not about Twinkies specifically. The idea was
Sugar.
he was suffering from the idea. This was the defense that he was suffering from depression and like borderline diabetes type thing. So he's already fucked up, and then he's eating shit he's not normally eating. So his blood sugar's all jacked up, and so he's not behaving rationally. That was the logic, and then it was popularly the Twinkie defense. In the case of the affluenza kid, you have to remember he was tried as a juvenile,
right.
and that's the biggest problem right there for most people.
The judge commented that the affluenza argument had nothing to do with her decision.
Which whatever.
right.
But the idea, though, in juvenile court's weird because we talk sometimes on the show about freedoms and due process. And so, therefore, we never talk about juvenile court where you don't have those things. Because as a child in America, you don't have rights. You are akin to property. And the judge can sentence you to whatever they want for whatever reasons they want. There are some limits. I'm exaggerating somewhat, but not a great deal. If they just say juvie would be good for you, in most jurisdictions, of course it varies, in most jurisdictions they actually have that right. It's like a family court type thing. They can pretty much do what they want.
And similarly, they can exonerate you.
Right. They can say, you know what?
You're just a kid.
You're just a kid. You did a shitty thing. It had terrible consequences, but I'm gonna
Unless
say,
you're black, and then you're going to like Sing.
Well,
if you're 15,
and that's a problem, of
Right.
course. But and that's the difference between being tried as a juvenile and being tried as an adult, and why
Right.
this whole double standard concept. Because a lot of times there's a gray area where you could be tried under either. And so I would argue in the couch case, the biggest problem was when he was tried as a juvenile rather than an adult. And then after that, when he was tried as a juvenile, the most he could stay in jail till he was 18, I think, or 19, depending on jurisdictions. But
yeah, unless they tried him as an adult,
which
is an option.
Which is an option.
Which is what happens to all the black kids.
But the affluenza thing didn't come up till the court case happened, which is
right.
after
The charges had been. So the reason this is back in the news is because, of course he's confined to living where the judge tells him to.
The same parents who did not teach him that there were consequences to his actions apparently do not feel that there should have been consequences to his actions and helped him run to Mexico. And that's just his mom, though. I guess his dad wasn't involved.
Right. The mom and him ran away to Mexico after what happened is that he had been partying with his friends here in the States, and pictures had come up on Twitter of it because that was illegal. That was a violation of his probation to be in the presence of alcohol and such and such.
He's not of legal age to be drinking. And it's also a violation because even for adults, even for somebody who's 25, if they're on probation, a lot of times their probation agreement will say things like, you're not allowed to drink.
Well, especially if it's an alcohol or drug related crime. Yeah.
No, it's actually part of the standard boilerplate.
Yeah, but it's
I mean,
especially stringent when
in that
when it's
case.
a really
they'll lean on you harder if that's the case. The judge is like, dude, like
Yeah.
not only was it a condition of your probation, but it's the whole fucking reason that you were on probation just because you were acting stupid on drugs and alcohol. They're generally.
Yep.
I dislike the probation system.
And so
I didn't like it much either.
So he ran away to Mexico and was in a resort for a while, and then they got more humble lodgings, I think. And then what happened is they ordered a pizza or something, and that got the attention of someone. I guess the pizza guy, turned him in, but he had changed his hair color and everything to disguise himself. And so they're now held by the Mexican authorities, and they're
being extradited
here. And so, hopefully he'll go to prison, and that'll be that. But I did read an article talking about his upbringing, and his upbringing was horrible.
Isn't he 19 now, though?
Yeah.
So, guess what? You are now responsible for your actions.
Yeah. But
the line may be arbitrary.
It was horrible. The parents divorced, and then they got back together, and they got a new house, and they just left him in the old mansion where he was living alone with like an Xbox and a huge TV.
Oh yeah, that sounds terrible.
Well, man, when you're 15. And
when I was 15, there'd been nothing more that I hated than being alone in a mansion with an Xbox. That would have been the worst thing ever.
You probably would have only needed the one room
wait,
and a
the
bathroom
horror.
somewhere.
The horror.
Yeah.
The horror.
Yeah.
It's better than I got now.
Yeah. It's pretty messed up when your parents are not involved in your life, and they just try to use technology and money to bribe you to stay out of their life, basically. That can be really messed up, that can mess you up, I think. But I'm not, anyway. He should go
They fuck you up, your mom and dad.
Yeah. So that's that stuff. What else do you guys have? We got about 5 minutes left here. Come on, boys. Let's chap in your ass. Oh, one of our fans, Samuel Thompson, recommended that I watch and talk about this Netflix series, Making a Murderer. It's you've probably heard of it already. It's a true crime.
It's the new Serial.
Yeah. It's a true crime documentary. It's also the greatest and longest binge watch that I have ever participated in. Paula and I watched it, the entire 10-hour series, back to back on New Year's Eve. And it was quite fascinating and emotionally engaging. So I recommend it. And I think we'll probably talk about it next week. But to give you
I'll watch it.
Yeah, to give you the synopsis, a man in Wisconsin was charged and convicted for rape in 1985 and served 18 years in prison until the DNA evidence was finally tested, and he was the serial rapist who had been around. His DNA was now identified on the victim, and this man, Avery, was exonerated. After 18 years in prison, he didn't do it. And the circumstances leading to that conviction were it was poor police work. In other words, they wanted this guy away. And so then he's released in 2000s.
Now, I will point something out, because that's a problem, that phrasing, because I agree with it. But a lot of times, a problem of documentaries like this, the shock that people experience is the idea that this was the exception. Often, this is the rule. That the police find a suspect, and we can say maybe they're right most of the time. I'm not anti-police at all. I do think they're trying to do good work
for the most. Yeah.
The problem is that as soon as that, externally we look at these cases sometimes, and if we don't walk into it with "he totally did it," we go, "Holy fuck!" What happened here? And then, of course, there are arguments and so on and so forth. But a lot of times, this idea that, well, in this case, there was poor police work. I would argue
this
often
is the way things are done. Yeah. And a lot of times they'll catch the right guy using the wrong methods. Like they'll know or think they know this guy did it, and they'll cook up some stuff to make him go away. And a lot of times that guy did do it. You just didn't have the evidence. Now, if you're a cop and you know there's a rapist on the loose, but you don't have evidence that's going to put him away, but you have the chance to say, well, I saw him, or this or that, add something to it that's going to put, what do you do? You know, and clearly you shouldn't lie as a cop or a judge or a lawyer. But on the other hand, if you don't, the rapist is going free to rape again. So very tough stuff.
I have an even weirder story for you. What do you do if you're a police officer and you have a serial killer loose and you have a guy and you think he did it, but somebody above you comes and says, you got to cut this guy loose because he's a member of the Communist Party. So you do. And then the wall comes down. And years later, these killings are still going on. And you call the FBI for help because they're the best at this shit in the world. And they come over and their guy looks at all the evidence you've ever collected. And he says, you had the guy right there. Why'd you let him go?
Right.
That's the actual story of Andre Chikatilo. He was like maybe one of the most prolific serial killers in history.
And so I don't understand why they would let him go because he was part of the Communist Party.
Because that's kind of how it worked. That's part of the story. I don't know if that might be simplifying it, but they made him cut him loose, and they had plenty of evidence.
I wouldn't be surprised. Well, I wouldn't be surprised
crazy,
if
man.
at the time it came across the circumstantial I mean, knowing nothing about this case, I'm talking out my ass, but it sounds like, based on what you're telling me and stuff, it would seem like it may be, post McCarthy or something like that, where it's this idea of you guys seem like you're persecuting him. Cut him loose, even though the cop thinks he did it, and maybe he did. And there's
caught him coming out of the woods with a bag full of tools and a dead girl out there, which is where they caught him again years later.
But what happens in this making a murderer thing is that the guy gets out of jail based on the DNA evidence, and then he's living there in Wisconsin, and the cops arrest him again for another separate murder. And so the documentary, you'll learn all of that in the first episode, and then the rest of it is trial footage and all this interesting stuff about how this guy gets put away. And the conspiracy theory is that the cops. So this guy got released from prison after 18 years. Didn't do it. Cops look bad. They look real, real bad. Now the victim, of course, is suing the county now for $38 million because of this false imprisonment, wrongful imprisonment.
Which I wish we had a standardization of that. I really do. Like, it's happened enough that rather than you shouldn't even have to sue. It should just be, if you are exonerated, like, you should be reimbursed. Like, you've been wronged. And the system may have worked exactly, even if there's no wronging, like ethically, like they did everything they were supposed to do, but like you've clearly been harmed in a circumstance where we then know for a fact you didn't do it. There should be like every year is $1 million. Like, or something. So, I mean, I just made that up.
That's for lawyers to
I know,
hammer
I'm just
out
saying.
with the court. But so the conspiracy theory being the cops were threatened with this gigantic lawsuit, and they were humiliated by the release of this guy. So they orchestrated, they planted evidence, is the conspiracy theory. Maybe it's never proven, but there's some very compelling stuff in this documentary. Basically, the cops now frame this guy for another crime so that A, he won't be able to sue them for that amount of money for the previous false imprisonment, and B, that the cops will be vindicated in the eyes of the public and say, well, he might not have done that first rape, but he's a bad guy and he killed this other lady now in 2003. So I won't tell you what happens, but the rest of the documentary is parsing out the case of the prosecution and then the defense, and it gets crazy, guys. It's the best true crime documentary I've ever seen, so hands down. So I recommend it. Making a Murderer on Netflix. So that's what that was.
It sounds very similar in many ways to Serial, which has become a thing.
It is,
which can trace its roots back to In Cold Blood to a certain extent. Anybody remember that?
Yeah.
Who wrote that?
The guy with the effeminate voice,
Truman Capote.
Yes, Capote.
He wrote that, and of course now those guys had actually done it. This was not an analysis of whether they'd done it, but there's been cases for, especially like there was a couple in the 90s that. And I'm terrible. I'm a terrible person, but I can't remember. But there were a couple cases in the 90s where it was like an analysis of like, did they do it? And then Serial happened last year, the case of Adnan Syed, and now we've got this one, which I will be watching probably this week.
Very highly recommended stuff.
Yeah.
Now, well, anyway, we'll talk about it next week. So anyone out there who's going to watch it, and then next week we're going to spoil it for you, and we're going to talk about what actually goes down. And the reason it was brought to my attention is because last week we touched on this whole that rape case I talked about, the whole false confessions thing. And that is huge.
Oh, the West Memphis 3. As soon as you bring up false confessions, that's the first thing I think about, the West Memphis 3. Sorry, go on.
Coerced confessions by the police. And we mentioned that it is legal for the cops to lie to you and to tell you your buddy already said it was you. We have evidence it was you. They can lie to you to elicit a confession, which a lot of people think is messed up. So
it's right up there with the whole. Some people think you a cop. You got to tell me you're a cop. Otherwise, it's entrapment. That's not how that works.
And so our Sam Thompson was listening to that last episode, and he brought this show to my attention. Said, "Hey, on that false confession tip, you should watch this show." And that comes into it hardcore. And when you see what happens in here, you'll understand how much of an issue that was. But so yeah, like I said, we'll spoil it for you next week. Give you a chance to listen to it. And that was our show today, episode 43, boys. We're gonna keep hitting it hard. We're gonna keep trying to improve the show. And any advice that listeners have, please, get in contact with us and give me questions that you want me to read on the air or comments and stuff. I keep begging for your involvement. Someone will pop up eventually, I'm sure. So guys, just listen to the show, click it, like it, and tell me what's wrong with it. Help me make it the podcast you want to hear, because it's harder than you think to improve something without guidance, and criticism. So criticize us and let us know what's up. We're going to keep hammering this show out until it's the biggest thing in the world. So, thanks for listening. We'll see you next Sunday. Bye-bye.